Now that we are completed with the washes on the garment, we will dive into the methods of adding destruction effects to a garment. We will be continuing from the completed jeans. You can use the file you've completed in the previous section or download the BW file from the download section. In this lesson, we will cover the following: obtaining destruction effects from images, creating destruction effects with a brush pack, using a PSD file to add destruction effects for a whole pattern. The first method is to obtain images of destruction effects. For this, we can take pictures of destruction effects or download or purchase them from online sources. We have provided some images for you to practice with in the download section. We will load Photoshop on our computer and load this image as our first example. To do so, we can drag and drop the image into Photoshop from our Finder if you are on a Mac, or your Windows Explorer if you are using Windows. We want to edit it to leave only the destruction effect. We can crop the image first by clicking on the crop tool, then adjust the crop region to the part of the destruction effect we want to keep. Click Enter to confirm the changes. Now we click on the lock icon on the layer to unlock it. Select the Eraser tool. An easy shortcut key to remember for the Eraser tool is E. We want to select an eraser that is not too harsh. We can use the soft round pressure opacity eraser. We reduce the opacity of the eraser to erase gradually. This helps to create a softer look along the edges as we erase parts of the image. You can play around with the opacity values as you erase the fabric from the image. As we get closer to the destruction effect, we can use a lower opacity. It's best to remove as much of the background as possible without erasing the strands of yarn that are sticking out. Adjusting the size of the eraser can help. A smaller eraser size can help us erase the parts closer to the fibers of the effect more precisely. Here's a quick way to adjust the opacity and size of the eraser. This method also applies to other tools like the brush tool. If you are using a Mac, hold down Ctrl and Option, then drag the cursor left or right to decrease or increase the size of the brush. If we drag the cursor up and down, this adjusts the opacity of the brush. If you are using Windows, you can use the same method but hold down the Alt key instead. We can clean up this image until it looks like this. Note, if a destruction effect has holes, we need to remember to erase the inside of the holes as well. Once we are done, we do a Save As and save the image as a PSD file. We can create a folder on our computer to save all of our destruction effect files. Take some time to clean up the image using the Erase tool. Let's go through another method you can use to remove the background. This method will be applicable if you're using Adobe Photoshop 2022 version or newer. We start by loading the image again in Photoshop. Similarly, we crop the image and unlock the layer. Next, in the toolbar, we select the Object Selection tool. If you do not see it, you can right-click on the Quick Selection tool or the Magic Wand tool, depending on what you see on the toolbar. The Object Selection tool is useful for automatically selecting objects or regions. Ensure the Object Finder is enabled. Then, we click on the destruction effect. A selection is made. We select the bottom effect as well. If we want to remove the background, we will invert the selection by clicking on Command-Shift-I if you are on a Mac, and Control-Shift-I if you are Windows. Right-click on the selection and click Feather. We enter a value between 1 to 3 pixels, then click OK. We hit the Delete button on our keyboard. Note, if you need to deselect the selection, click Command or Control-D. Now we have extracted the destruction effect. If needed, we can use the eraser tool to clean up the edges slightly. Remember to also delete the background for the part of the effect where there are holes. We do a Save As for this image and save it in the same folder as the previous destruction effect. Note, there are many other ways to go about this. The methods shared are just some of the possible ways. If you're using Adobe Photoshop 2022 version or newer, take some time to try this method to clean up the image. The next step would be to desaturate the image, or we can adjust the specific colors on the image by using the Replace Color option. If you are a beginner to Photoshop, we recommend the Desaturate option. Go to Image, Adjustment, and Desaturate. This practice is recommended as we can easily change the base color in VStitcher using the color blending mode. However, if you need the artwork to be colored a certain way, we can skip these steps and adjust the colors of the yarns and base separately in Photoshop. Afterwards, we will make adjustments to curves to ensure the image is not too contrasted or faded. We go to Adjustments on the right side of the screen and click on Curves. We can drag the points to adjust the contrast of the image. Additionally, we can add points by clicking along the line. This looks about right. We can always edit it again in Photoshop once we have checked it in VStitcher. We save this as a PSD file. Saving it as a PSD file instead of an image file maintains the layers, so it's easier to make changes afterwards. As mentioned in previous lessons, a PSD file would be larger than an image file. Thus, if file size is a concern, you can also export the image as a PNG file. We also want to desaturate the first effect we extracted from the image. Ensure to save the changes made. Pause the lesson here to finish adjusting the images and saving the files. In VStitcher, we load the completed jeans file. We can add the images as piece assignable trim. Then assign them to the garment. The next step would be to adjust the color to match. We can adjust the color blending mode and use the picker to pick a suitable color. Remember that there is no one correct color blending mode. We recommend playing around with the different modes and picking out different colors to find the most suitable one. If we need to further edit the image in Photoshop, we can edit externally from the Material Image Editor. As we have learned when creating washes, if we are working with a PSD file, we can save the file and it will automatically be updated in VStitcher. If we are working with image files like PNG, we must flatten or merge the layers that are created in Photoshop before we are able to save the file and have it automatically load in VStitcher. The trim in VStitcher is automatically updated and looks great. The next method is by creating the effects using Photoshop brushes. This requires Photoshop brushes that are preset with destruction effects, like this, which can be downloaded or purchased from online sources. Alternatively, you can also use any other raster-based software to create your own destruction effects. We can create a PSD file for each individual effect and save them separately. This will be useful as we can add each effect onto any part of the garment. We have added a free brush pack in the download section. We start by loading a new Photoshop canvas. To load the brush pack into Photoshop, we first select the brush tool. Select the current brush type from the menu at the top of the program. Use the small menu button to select Import Brushes. Find the ABR file you want to use and select Load. Now the new brush pack is available at the bottom. We create a new layer. Then we use the brush tool, selecting a suitable color. It is best to use a white or off-white color for this, as it's easier to alter the color in VStitcher. This brush pack contains many different effects, and we can pick one. If we look at the effect, it looks one-dimensional. To improve this, we can add a gray shadow cast on the back of the effect. A quick way to do this is to double-click on the layer, then we enable the Drop Shadow option. We change the blending mode to multiply and reduce the opacity. We can play around with the values for the distance, spread, and size to achieve the look we want. Additionally, we can add more texture by stamping and erasing some parts of the effect. We can delete the background and crop the image to the size of the destruction effect. Save the file as a PSD file. Once done, we can bring the file into VStitcher as a piece assignable trim and apply it to the garment. We adjust the color to match and again can make any necessary changes using the Edit option in the image editor. Pause the lesson here to create a destruction effect using the brush pack provided. If we do not want to save the images of the separate destruction effects as individual files, we can add the washes to a garment by using one PSD file for one whole pattern and add all destruction effects from that pattern in one file. For this, we need to export a print to file of the pattern. We can use these settings to export. We bring the PDF generated into Photoshop and create a new layer before adding in the destruction effects to the areas we want. We repeat these steps to add each effect. This method allows us to create more customized effects for the garment, as we can manipulate the brushes to create unique effects in Photoshop. We hide the background and save this as a PSD file. We then add the file into VStitcher and assign it to the relevant pattern. Take some time to try out this method of adding destruction effects to the jeans. In this video, we've learned a few methods to create or obtain destruction effects.